With school holidays here, I guess a lot of us will be going bush, turning off the main road, heading out along little country roads like this. The tragedy of it is, though, that a lot of serious accidents occur on small country roads like this, when drivers, perhaps city drivers, simply don't make allowances for the changing conditions, for the narrower road, loose surfaces very often, broken edges, all the things that can happen out in the country. You need to think about it. Come for a drive. Because, as always, you do need your seatbelt. Just because you're out in the country doesn't mean you don't need a belt. In fact, more so than ever, you should make sure everyone's belted up. The very first thing you've got to remember about driving in the country is that you never really know what's over the next hill. You'll find fewer signs to help you, and you really must expect there to be a cattle or sheep or another car or a truck picking up milk, anything over the next crest, and that's how you've got to drive. If you do come across something unexpected, don't wrench the car off the road and then put the brakes on. Try and get your braking done on the tar. If you put one wheel on the tar, one wheel on the dirt, and then brake, it's going to be unstable. So try and get your braking done on the tar where you've got the most grip, then get off the road if you have to. But remember, you'll wash off speed a lot faster with two wheels on the tar. When you come to a gravel surface again, you've got to think different traction. It doesn't hurt to have a look in the mirror, see if there's nothing around. Just give the brakes a good dab and just get a feel for the gravel road. Get a feel for how much traction you've actually got. If you come over a crest and find there is a turn there that you didn't expect, again, don't just lock up the brakes. Get the speed, feel the wheels gripping, then get off them, see if you can get around that corner. Obviously you should keep your speed well under the level that you're going to get into trouble on a corner. Here's a good instance. Now, we don't really know what's happening. If we were to sail through here, it looks like the road goes round there, but surprise, surprise, it kinks that way a little bit. There's a dip in the middle, so we've had to adjust our speed. And the clue to driving on gravel really is doing everything smoothly, just like a wet tar road. In the country, you have to learn to read the road, anticipate where you might find a tractor, or cows crossing the road, or someone doing a U-turn just over the brow of a hill. And you can't afford to get carried away with the view. Because the road is narrow, your driving has to be just that little bit more accurate. We've all heard drivers blame loose gravel for a crash, but loose gravel isn't the problem. It's a driver's inability to handle such a surface. The classic mistake is to brake too hard, lock up the wheels and lose steering. See how even at low speeds you could panic yourself onto the wrong side of the road. As we said, smooth driving is safe driving on loose surfaces. The country has some unique hazards too. Don't ever ignore warning signs at river crossings. The water doesn't have to be too deep to wash a car from a crossing, which often has a slippery, mossy surface. Always approach a crossing slowly and don't blast through at high speed. If nothing else, you might drown the ignition system. Most importantly, when you come out the other side, drive a short distance with your foot on the brake pedal to dry out the brakes. Otherwise, the first time you go to stop, you might find you've got no brakes. And even if you have a four-wheel drive vehicle, don't underestimate the power of water. It's so peaceful out in the country, it's sometimes hard to imagine that there's danger here. But there's certainly danger on a country road for a driver that doesn't concentrate. There mightn't be as many cars around, but that doesn't mean that you can switch your mind off. When you leave the city, leave the highway, you have to concentrate just as hard as ever to stay out of trouble. Don't forget that. Up the
Newcastle Permanent Building Society, a large gathering of businessmen, politicians and local government representatives, were on hand
for whom it will be unthinkable to take any subsidy of the world.
Ted Knox spoke about his pioneering role in life
Around the world, people are saying this is the only way we can tackle the problem. Stand over merger too, I might say. But
Premier Land. The Premier said he wasn't here to give only moral support to drug education in the area by simply being around when the first education van went into official service. He announced the government's provision for $50,000 for another mobile van, another $50,000 for the employment of 2 drug education teachers, and a further $100,000 towards the setting up of life education buildings in the region. These are the planned buildings. This model shows the Life Education Centre to be built on land off Main Road at Edgeworth. The land has already been donated by the state government. The centre will be the administrative and education headquarters for Hunter Life Education. Another part of the building project is a youth centre built on land at Barnsley. 4 hectares of land at Barnsley have been donated for the purpose by coal producer Coal and Allied, with the promise of access to a larger adjacent area. All up, it's about a $3 million venture, hoped to be completed by 1988. Outside in King Street, the first mobile van, thanks to the Newcastle Permanent Building Society, was set to go. Delport Daihatsu donated a Toyota Prime Mover to tow it. This van and future similar ones will visit schools throughout the Hunter and the Central Coast regions, especially trained teachers, taking to children the basic message that their bodies should never be abused by the use of any kind of drugs. I asked Father Bridge if he was satisfied with the extent of the government's commitment made to life education.
I am, John. Yes, I think this is more than adequate for our Stage 1 development, and the most important thing is to get these 2 vans now into the Hunter and into the schools so that every member of the community can see it, the children can be involved with it. Now when that is functioning and well underway, we can then think about building the second stage, which is the physical unit to it.
You are now at the controls of the first safety simulator.
Champion, specialising in exhibit by Rose
Just about every cat for every category.
They say that a dog is man's best friend, but judging by some of the entries in this cat show, they've got some tough competition.
With some units, we decided to take a quick cat nap and start through 2 months. But all in all, the day was a perfect success. Because for some, their curiosity equals us at the street.
It's a show cat. You have to look after it a lot, don't you? What are some of the things that you do to it before you show it?
Well, usually you groom it about a week before the show, and then you bath it, and you put a lot of powder in him and make him look good, and you always brush his fur upwards.
Why do you do that?
So the fur grows better.
The land in question lies around the fringe of the Glenrock Recreation Area and includes many of the area's higher spots. On Newcastle City Council's recommendation, the owner of the land, Bailey's Estate, has agreed to donate 2/3 of the land to the recreation area if the other 1/3 is rezoned for residential use. But the Forum and other groups are not happy and are now trying every avenue to secure the whole parcel of land. The Forum has voted to approach the City Administration to stop rezoning of the remaining land and thus stop development. They will also write to Premier Rand to lodge their objection and to the Treasury to apply for a grant to buy the land. Forum spokesman David Ross says it's very important to the area that the land is not developed.
Well, it's on the edge of the escarpment. It's very, very important visually, and it will certainly degrade this very important part of the Glenrock State Recreation Area if it is, in my opinion, and the opinion of the Forum, if it is allowed to be developed for residential development.
Ken Bailey of C&O Bailey, which owns the land, says they would be happy to sell the land to the government for inclusion in the recreation area. However, he believes this is unlikely.
We've agreed with the council's suggestion that we hold off sale. However, now I think that Mr. Rand has indicated that he's got no interest in purchasing the land. We should be permitted to go ahead with our sale and subdivision. Remember, of course, that we'll be giving 2/3 of this to the people of Newcastle for the Glenrock Recreation Area.
Taking passengers from Bulahdelah and Foster to Newcastle. Here, passengers can connect with trains to Sydney. A return service is also offered, though not on the same day, as current train timetables make this unworkable. In October, the State Rail Authority plans to introduce super coaches on the same run. Proprietor of the Bulahdelah Bus Company, Jim Richards, says this service will not only duplicate his own, it will send it out of business.
I think we would be, yes. I think we would have a job to compete with a government-operated bus line.
Do you feel you provide an adequate bus service for Bulahdelah and Foster residents wanting to travel to Sydney?
I feel we do. For many years we only ran a 4-day-a-week service, but this has been updated now and we service the area every day.
Mr. Richards has been supported in his objections by the Bulahdelah Chamber of Commerce.
It's a waste of taxpayers' money, as we see it, according to the figures that were given to us by the bus company. You're looking at an average of about 13 people per trip, and it looks as if there would be 2 45-seater buses looking for the patronage of those 13 people, which is not quite good economic sense as far as we're concerned.
In the first half, it's also true that the Goannas defeated Western Suburbs in both rounds and were in the win at the ISC the best team I've seen in 1985. They were organised, played to a forward pattern, something that's a rarity this year, and looked sharp, big and talented in the back line. But you would have not recognised them last Sunday. They were awful, and apparently that's been their recent form. The strong word is that Captain Coach Bruce Starkey will again be out, or if he plays, he will be chock full of painkillers. It's probably now up to Mick Schofield to take charge, and he can do it. On the other hand, West, despite their loss in the semis to Lakes, have been on the improve after a series of unimpressive games in the second round. It's also fair to say that they did make equal breaks with Cessnock early in the game in that second round loss, but spilled the ball. It's also true to say that they normally score when they breach a defence. If they can do that, they will earn that favouritism. West have 2 of the best 3 players in the town, Cessnock the other. You be the judge as to who I think they are. Their first try, but
It was at 10:20 this morning that a Navy-seeking helicopter found the 13-metre yacht called Voss, crippled and floundering in heavy seas 53 nautical miles off Seal Rock. A short time earlier, the 4 crewmen had climbed from the yacht into a life raft in preparation for the lift aboard the chopper. Several other Navy and Air Force planes were involved in the search, and the Iron Whyalla was steaming towards the location. The rescue ended the crew's 24-hour battle with high winds and violent seas. The yacht's owner, Jack Clark of Copacabana on the Central Coast, skipper Alan Fenwick, also at Copacabana, and Tony Larson of Hardy's Bay, and Rod Nicholson of Artarmon left Broken Bay yesterday morning bound for Lord Howe Island. Around midnight, the Voss was capsized by a huge wave and sent out a mayday call. It was first picked up by radio in Adelaide, and the National Safety Council located the yacht off Seal Rocks thanks to the craft's electronic emergency beacon. The yacht was later righted by another wave, but the steering was broken. Despite the force of the waves, the crew escaped without injury. When they landed at Royal Newcastle Hospital, they were placed under observation but later allowed to leave. The Voss was last sighted afloat, and its owner will attempt to salvage it within the next few days. Not so lucky were the Sydney crew of the 9-metre Oana 2, which was towed badly damaged into Foster at 7 this morning. Keith Halloran suffered a severed thumb, John Olsen severe facial lacerations, and Peter Dubbs was hospitalised for exposure. Only Peter Riches was uninjured, and he praised their rescuers.
We're assisted by a lot of people, which I give great thanks to.
It was
the
water
Oana 2
police
was
who
taken
towed
in
the yacht
tow
to
at
safety,
5:30 this
but
morning by the police-launched Doyle from Newcastle. It was hit by a giant wave at 6:30 last night, snapping the mast and the steering gear. The crew are now recovering from their ordeal in Taree Hospital.
The Mooney Mooney Bridge is spectacular. At 70 metres, it's 11 metres higher than the deck of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It spans half a kilometre across the picturesque Mooney Mooney Valley. It's one of 15 bridges to be built in this 13-kilometre section of the F3 freeway, and it alone will cost $19.5 million of the federal government's National Highway Fund. The last 2 metres of the span was poured last Thursday in the early hours of the morning. The reason for that was that the temperature of the concrete when setting must be the same from top to bottom, and in the heat of the day the top layer of concrete heats up quicker than the lower layer. As supervisor of the project, the State Minister for Roads, Laurie Brereton, was on hand to pull out the last bolt and witness the tearing away of the last piece of framework on the first of the 2 3-lane spans. The Mooney Mooney Creek Bridge is a vital part of this section of the F3 freeway between Summersby and Calga. When completed early next year, it will cut down the trip between Sydney and Newcastle by 14 kilometres. And it's hoped that it will reduce the number of accidents in this area by 75%.
It's not only going to mean a first-rate link between Sydney and Newcastle, it's also going to mean the elimination of one of the most dangerous sections of road in the state. That's the notorious Peats Ridge section. It's a section that's had a terrible accident record, 80 deaths in the last 8 years, 100 serious accidents every year. It's going to mean much faster and much safer travelling for all who must use this highway.
Perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of the project is the use of these strain gauges attached to monitoring computers. There are 100 gauges like this one throughout the bridge. Engineer Tom Anderson.
Well, essentially what it allows us to do is to measure internal changes in length in the concrete, and from that we can check on what the stresses are in the concrete and then know the full behaviour of the structure. It allows us to see how the bridge is behaving, and of course for future designs this is very valuable information.
This is Janelle Provost reporting. Volunteers are urgently required at the Hunter's 3 psychiatric and mental retardation hospitals as a result of the nurses and ancillary staff strike. At this stage, Morisset is the worst affected. That story tonight on NBN News at 6.
the Australian Institute of Sport was created in 1980. It's the home for 280 athletes from 10 different sports. The complex provides arguably the best facilities in the Southern Hemisphere, all built on a 65-hectare site in the national capital.
Places at the Australian Institute of Sport don't come easily. For Novocastrian David Forbes, he's fighting to keep a competitive edge to stay here in Canberra to train with the best.
David is 24 and came from Hamilton South. He's been at the Institute for the past 9 months. He's hopeful of qualifying for the 1500 metres and 5000 metres for the next Commonwealth Games. Every day he practices at the huge track and field stadium, which in October will house 25,000 spectators at the World Cup.
Have you seen an improvement in your performance since you started here at the Australian Institute?
On the track times there's been no sort of time improvement, but training-wise I've been training much better and much stronger now. So hopefully next season we'll see a marked improvement, especially over 5 kilometres.
What are you working towards? What's your big goal?
Commonwealth Games, 1500 and 5000 I think are very realistic qualifying goals. I think the 1500 will be no problem at all, and the 5000 is something that I ideally want to qualify for.
Do you feel a lot of pressure here to have to keep your spot?
Most certainly. You're only here on a sort of a 6-monthly basis on performances, so my spot's okay to the end of the year, and then it'll be the next 6 months after that where I have to perform, as I'm not really a winter runner, so there's not much I could do in the winter anyway.
Has your style changed at all while you've been here?
A little bit. I was generally a front runner in races before I came here. Now I've tended to settle down a little bit in races, but at the same time that's been a bit of a drawback because I go to sleep and lose contact with the leading bunch, particularly in 5000s. I'm still learning to race them. But next year I think I'll go back to my old way of running 1500s from the front.
So it's as much in the head as it is in the body?
I think so, yeah. Once you reach a national standard, I think the winner normally comes from the strongest guy in the head rather than surely physically he's got to be strong as well, but you've got to be able to think like a winner as well as run like one, I think.